So there is a series of videos. They're done by Australian comedian named Jimmy Reese. Some of you may have found him during the pandemic. So there's a video of him, and it's an exchange between the guy who decides the names of things, and he's sipping a cocktail throughout, and Jason, who works for the guy who decides the names for things. And Jimmy Reese, the comedian, plays both parts. So I'm going to attempt to give you a little bit of it. So Jason holds up a photo of an animal and asks, and Australian accents. I can't do it, but it'd just be my Cleveland accent. So Jason holds up a photo of an animal and asks, "What should we call this animal, sir?" The guy who decides the names of things responds, "The red panda." Jason, "It doesn't look like a panda, sir." Guy, "It doesn't have to look like a panda." Jason, "Okay, because it's related to the panda." No, it's not related to a panda. It's related to a raccoon." "That's misleading," pleads Jason. "Next," demands the guy who decides the names of things. "I've got this game, sir, that's invented in Germany," and we see a photo of Chinese checkers. The guy who names things says, "Checkers." Jason, no, sir, it's not a form of checkers. It's actually, the guy cuts him off, "Chinese checkers." "It originated in Germany, sir." Other items named by the guy who decides the names of things are Greek yogurt, not invented in Greece, strawberries, not strawberries at all, and the Panama hat, which comes from Ecuador. Most traditions take a more sober approach to the naming of things. The Torah takes names and naming seriously. The first human is Adam, created from the earth, or Adamah. Later, Avram becomes Abraham, or Avraham, and Sarai becomes Sarah when God's name is added to theirs. 2 generations later, the man who wrestles with Jacob gives him a new name. "Your name shall no longer be Jacob, but Israel," meaning one who struggles with God. Parents give thoughtful consideration to naming their children. Names can have symbolic and/or sentimental connections, clever initials, the initials may spell something, or nicknames, or quirky spellings, and are often beloved by both the bestower and the bearer of the name. It is a custom for Ashkenazi parents to name children after deceased relatives, and for Sephardim to name after living ones. Both traditions link memories of the past with hope for the future. Given the emphasis on naming people in Jewish tradition, it is reasonable to assume that past generations of Jews were also deliberate in choosing names for the congregations they established. So let's turn our attention to our name and what that name might mean to us and for us in the coming year. First, what is our name? It is officially Rodef Shalom Congregation, but for many years we were also known as Rodef Shalom Temple. In basic terms, congregation refers to the people, while the building is the temple. But there is nuance to the difference as well. If you grew up here, it is likely that at some point you'd said something like, "Are we going to temple?" Or, "I saw your wife's cousin's best friend at temple." Or, because you're all related to each other, you saw one of your relatives here. I still hear temple sometimes. No direct article, not the temple, just temple. But do you know why you call it that? For nearly a millennium, the temple in Jerusalem was the ancient center of Jewish worship, that is, the temple. There, priests, in Hebrew Kohanim, offered sacrifices on behalf of the people until, in 70 CE, the Romans destroyed the temple and Jerusalem. The first synagogues were meant to temporarily replace the Temple of Jerusalem until our presumed eventual return to Israel. The word synagogue comes from the Greek and means place of assembly, or in Hebrew, Beit Knesset. The early reformers of Judaism in Germany neither anticipated nor desired a return to Israel and the sacrificial system. Thus, they symbolically, if not as an act of rebellion, called their first congregations temples. They even went so far as to declare Berlin the New Jerusalem. Our use of the word temple, comes from this theological and philosophical place. This naming practice continued to distinguish Reform from conservative and Orthodox congregations well into this century. In many towns, for example, there was a temple and a synagogue, and every Jew was emotionally attached to one or the other, rarely, if ever, to both. Such distinctions are less potent today. So, that's temple. What about Rodef? At some point, we became known and we began referring to ourselves as Rodef. I remember actually when that happened. I was here. I wasn't here, as in I wasn't working at Rodef Shalom, but I was in the community, and suddenly it became known as Rodef. Rodef translates to one who pursues. The Talmud refers to Din Rodef, or the law of the pursuer, which says, and I'm pretty sure this is going someplace that you don't expect, that every Jew is obligated to save a pursued person from a pursuer, even if this means killing the pursuer. So a Rodef is a pursuer. A Rodef Shalom, on the other hand, pursues peace among people. An early and dramatic midrash insists that each of us must be a Rodef Shalom. And further, it is not enough to wish for peace while safely tucked away somewhere. We must be intentional. We must leave our homes and our comfort zones and come face to face with others. The at once exciting and challenging part of this midrash is that it insists that none of us alone knows enough about shalom to begin to make it. We can't do it by ourselves. We don't even know enough. We don't even know enough of what it is. One rabbi writes, merely plumbing our own souls will not reveal all that we need to know. We have so much to learn, and we often need to learn it from others. It is clear that our name is not Rodef. It's not pursuer. Rodef Shalom, pursuer of peace, is better. But this teaching about learning to make peace from others implores us to take the next step. As we acknowledge that the work of pursuing peace is a group effort, requiring the combined energy and vision of an entire community, it feels right to make regular use of the last part of our name, congregation. Vivek H. Murthy, the 19th and 21st, and that is current Surgeon General of the United States, studied the role of community in our lives. His book, Together, describes the importance of human connection, the hidden impact of loneliness on our health, and the social power of community. Murthy's chapter on the cultures of connection opens with a quotation from author Jane Howard. It's at the top of the chapter. And it says, call it a clan, call it a network, call it a tribe, call it a family. Whatever you call it, whoever you are, you need one. You need one because you are human. To paraphrase a well-known poem, we need one another when we are weary and in need of strength, when we have joys we yearn to share, in the beginning of the year and when it ends. And as I often share when reading Psalm 23, we never outgrow the need to feel protected and cared for. Call it a clan, call it a network or a tribe or a family. We call this a congregation. And while a congregation is an important social institution, it is much more than that. Interestingly, early congregations attached the prefix Kahal Kadosh, or KK, or in Hebrew, Kuf, meaning holy congregation, before their names. Congregating, joining together for sacred purposes, this is the very essence of our being and the reason for our existence. kahal kadosh. About service groups, including religious organizations, Dr. Vivek Murthy writes that they provide safe opportunities to rekindle a sense of meaning, value, and purpose, while also connecting with others. In fact, he adds, there is therapeutic energy that emerges when we come together with others to take action to achieve a common goal. What could be more sacred than the common goal of pursuing peace? Our name, the whole thing, proclaims, we are Rodef Shalom Congregation, a Kahal Kadosh, a holy congregation, relentlessly pursuing harmony, wholeness, and peace. I think it's time to start referring to this synagogue community as Rodef Shalom Congregation, even if it takes a fraction of a second longer. But even more critically, it's time we start acting in ways that honor our name. To that end, can we agree to respectfully hold each other accountable for what we say and do? Can we find ways to offer what our ancient rabbinic sages called tochacha, gentle rebukes, honest feedback that comes from a place of love and concern and care? Can we always endeavor to respect the other's dignity and their spark of the divine? Can we agree that the response to discord and difference of opinion is not dividing ourselves into teams? We are members of one holy congregation, but we are not, and we never will be, unanimous in our approaches to, well, probably to anything. Can we work on the assumption that everyone is trying their best? That we all believe we have the congregation's best interests at heart? That we all believe we have the congregation's best interests at heart? Or in our personal lives, can we remember that all humans are flawed, that we are just as flawed as the one with whom we are annoyed? Making peace sounds big, and it sounds overwhelming, even when we remember that it takes a village. We are wise to remember that shalom is connected to wholeness, both in its grammar and in its philosophy. Shalom is wholeness. And wholeness is connected to well-being, which starts with small gestures, with modest acts of kindness and generosity. I love this story told by Rabbi David Wolpe, which is quite beautiful and reveals the impact on another person's well-being, another person's shalom, their wholeness. The magic in this story and in life starts with noticing. Rabbi David Wolpe tells how when his paternal grandfather died, his own father, Rabbi Gerald Wolpe, was 11. He was 11 years old. Gerald's mother was a widow at 34, and he, an only child, bore much of the grief alone. Following his father's death, the young Wolpe started walking to synagogue early every morning to join the minyan and say Kaddish. At the end of his first week, he noticed that the shamash of the synagogue, a Mr. Einstein, walked past his home just as he left to walk to synagogue. Mr. Einstein, already advanced in years, explained, "Your home is on the way to the synagogue. I thought it might be fun to have some company. That way, I don't have to walk alone." For a year, the young Wolpe and Mr. Einstein walked through the New England seasons, through the humidity of summer and the snow of winter. They talked about life and loss, and for a while, Gerald was not so alone. Years later, Gerald, or as he is more commonly known, Jerry, was married, and he became a father. Jerry called Mr. Einstein, now well into his 90s, and asked if he would like to meet his new wife and child. Mr. Einstein agreed, but said that in view of his age, Wolpe would have to come to him. Rabbi Wolpe writes, "The journey was long and complicated. His home by car was fully 20 minutes away. I drove in tears as I realized what he had done. He had walked for an hour to my home so that I would not have to be alone each morning. By the simplest of gestures, the act of caring, he took a frightened child and led him with confidence and with faith back into life. Mr. Einstein embodied key elements of what we have been thinking about tonight. He was a Rodef Shalom, who with a simple gesture helped a young man pursue peace in his heart after his profound loss. Many of you have heard me say this. I always tell people, just leave the grand gestures for once-in-a-lifetime events. The simple, everyday gestures of concern and compassion, those are the ones that bring about peace. We conclude as we began. The humor in Jimmy Reese's comedy is that things are given names completely and absurdly disconnected with their identities. Raccoons are called pandas. Checkers is named after a country on the other side of the globe from where it was invented. And strawberries are miscategorized as berries. At the beginning of a new year, and especially today, on the Day of Atonement, we are invited to consider, are we living up to our name? Are we living up to the name Rodef Shalom Congregation? To be sure, there have been times when we have failed in our mission and responsibility to pursue wholeness and peace, when we have allowed our connections with others to fray and weaken, and our very sense of community has been allowed to be threatened. Yom Kippur offers the opportunity for tshuva, to return to the lofty ideals contained within our name. I invite you tonight to join with me in common purpose to build and to rebuild a holy community, Rodef Shalom Congregation, a community united in the pursuit of peace. Shana Tova.